to the vibe, the pride, the power. This is Charge. Hey, yo, Buffalo, you're gonna love this one, Sadna. Nah, I lived in a lab making this joint. Hours turned to days until it was perfect. Bill's Mafia in the house. It's the Queen City anthem, built on grit and grind. Buffalo style, yeah, one of a kind. Snow falling heavy, but the fire burns bright under them stadium lights. The Mafia ignites, we hold it down, loyal through the pain. Every snap, every hit, it's the charge we sustain. From the fans to the field, it's more than a game. It's a family, a legacy, remember the name.
Charge up the field, let the crowd take flight. Buffalo's heart, shining so bright. Feel the energy under stadium lights. Bill's Mafia strong, it's the charge tonight.
Yeah, we hold it down. In the 716. Let's go. From the tailgates lit to the thunderous sound, you can feel the passion when the Bills come around. It's a blue-collar love, built tough and true. From the heart of the city to the red, white, and blue, we bring that heat, even in the cold. With every drive, another story unfolds. It's Buffalo pride, yeah, the Mafia way. Under them lights, we making plays. You feel that? That's Buffalo pride. Every fan, every play, this city rides. We built this together. We'll never fall. Bill's Mafia forever. We answer the call. Through the highs and lows, we stay in the fight. Buffalo strong, yeah, the future is bright.
Charge up the field, let the crowd take flight. Buffalo's heart, shining so bright. Feel the energy under stadium lights. Bill's Mafia strong, it's the charge tonight.
Yeah, we hold it down. In the 716. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. From the tailgates lit to the thunderous sound, you can feel the passion when the Bills come around. It's a blue-collar love built tough and true. From the heart of the city to the red, white, and blue, we bring that heat, even in the cold. With every drive, another story unfolds. It's Buffalo pride, yeah, the Mafia way. Under them lights, we making plays. You feel that? That's Buffalo pride. Every fan, every play, this city rides. We built this together. We'll never fall. Bill's Mafia forever. We answer the call. Through the highs and lows, we stay in the fight. Buffalo strong, yeah, the future is bright.
Charge up the field, let the crowd take flight. Buffalo's heart, shining so bright. Feel the energy under stadium lights. Bill's Mafia strong, it's the charge tonight.
Mic, bringing it straight from Western New York to the world. This is Charge with Thomas and Sterling. Bill's Mafia, stand tall and proud. We got this.
Bills Mafia, Charge Nation, what's going on? Happy Thursday. As you can tell, Sterling looks a little different tonight. I got my guy, Rob, the other part of Intentional Grounding, is joining me tonight as Sterling had to make a very sudden disappearance. He had some work stuff to take care of, and Rob was so generous to join us. So, Rob, hello.
What's going on, man? It's I apologize for the immediate downgrade from Sturls, but I'll do my best to fill the shoes of Sturls for the girls tonight, you know?
I think you'll do just fine. You definitely got the smoky voice that he desperately lacks. He's more bubbly and fun, so I do appreciate that, and I think that'll come in handy for tonight.
Right on, right on. Well, I'm happy to be here and go through some of this stuff with you today.
Absolutely. We do have a lot to talk about. First things first, if you are watching, Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in tonight, and want to make sure you rate, review, subscribe, give us all the love. It means the world to us over here at Buffalo Media Network. Obviously, we've got multiple shows. Tuesday night, you got Intentional Grounding with Rob and Sterling. Obviously, tonight is normally myself and Sterling, and then Saturdays on pregame, we've got Rob, Dave, and Sterling. We got some new stuff coming down the pipeline, so definitely stay tuned and look forward to some exciting stuff. But let's definitely get tonight kicked off. And there is a big time awards ceremony happening tonight with a bunch of our guys, our Buffalo Bills, at the forefront for some very major awards. Obviously headlined by the NFL MVP with Josh Allen. And we'll get to that in just a second. But we're going to go through some of these and talk about some of these awards, who you think, and so kind of just the overall baseline of where the NFL is right now and what these awards look like. So every single year, you know, some of these awards are kind of written in stone, but it seems this year there's a lot of up and down as to who people think are going to kind of land in these spots. Assistant Coach of the Year, you've got Joe Brady from Buffalo, Brian Flores, defensive coordinator from Minnesota, Aaron Glenn, DC from Detroit, who just got a job as the New York Jets head coach, Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator from Detroit, who just got the Chicago Bears head coaching job, and then Vic Fangio, the DC of Philadelphia. Rob, any feeling? Could this be Joe Brady's chance? What are you looking at here?
Of course, we're a little biased towards Joe Brady for this category. It's interesting because as you go through, there's really only one guy who didn't get head coaching consideration in this cycle on that list, and that's Vic Fangio, and he's the one that's still coaching. So it's kind of interesting that that worked out that way. I think he did a heck of a job, and I think Brian Flores did as well. I think the Lions guys are going to cancel each other out here. So I don't think either of them are going to win it, because I think a lot of the press that would vote for one or the other are going to split the vote there. I personally, I just think when you look at the talent that's available to the other three coaches, Minnesota's got plenty of talent on defense. Vic Fangio's got probably the best roster in the NFL. And then Joe Brady, everybody was talking about, well, they don't have any weapons. They don't have any receivers. And you got to get this everybody eats formula to work. And so to me, I think that's a huge indicator of, and you'll hear that argument again, in a little bit when we talk about MVP, but I think that's a huge argument in favor of, hey, you needed great coaching and you needed an MVP to have one of the most prolific offenses in the NFL.
Yeah, and you have to think the onus of Joe Brady and what he's done with a fully revamped wide receiver core. The only guy that the Buffalo Bills had that caught a pass was Khalil Shakir, and he caught 34 of them last year. So doing that and a brand new offense, you saw what he did last year. He took over Ken Dorsey's offense. Ken Dorsey just keeps bouncing around. Obviously, that was a hodgepodge mess that just did not work out. So to put them not only to break the franchise record for scoring in a single season, but to be the second highest scoring offense, take them to the AFC Championship, and only lose by 3, I would say is a pretty damn good year, all things considered.
Well, and let's be honest, TD. Let's be honest. I mean, it was a completely different offense that he called than Dorsey was calling. It was much more focused around the run game. I mean, in 1 year, he really did, year and a half, I guess, really did change the identity of that offense. And you talked about the turnover at wide receiver. Sure, you've got a superstar at quarterback, but to coach all 11 guys to be that effective, I think it was really an impressive job from Joe Brady this year.
Yeah, and you got to be excited knowing that he's going to be back. I mean, this very seldom does Josh Allen or any star quarterback get to keep their OC for more than a year or two. We saw Ben Johnson was there for 2 years, gone. You've seen multiple OCs all over the place, especially hot commodity ones. They just cycle through the head coaching kind of just vacancies. So good to have him back this year. He did an incredible job. You really saw the upswing, and he developed James Cook to become top 5, top 3 running back in the game, which has been a long time coming. I mean, we have not had a stone cold killer in the backfield since, prime Fred Jackson, prime CJ Spiller, prime Travis Henry. Like, it's hard to say.
And with the usage the way it is for NFL running backs nowadays, to get him, I mean, to get him to be as feared of a weapon as he was on, 15 to 16 touches a game is an impressive thing in today's NFL. So scheming the running back position to be something that strikes fear into other teams, I think is, like I said, part of the scheme. It's impressive.
Yeah, incredible job. And moving forward, the head coach of the year. You got Dan Campbell, Mr. Ankle Biters himself for the Detroit Lions. Kevin O'Connell, who I think should be the odds-on favorite here with the Minnesota Vikings. What he did with Sam Darnold, getting them to a really impressive season. Sean Payton with the Denver Broncos, a valiant job taking a team that a lot of people thought might be good, but weren't sure with Bo Nix. Put them right up there with some of the best teams in the AFC. Dan Quinn, who absolutely should be in consideration. Washington Commanders. I mean, gosh, what an entire change of hands from Dan Snyder being gone to their new owner coming in. Incredible work there. And then Andy Reid. Again, I'm going to go some WWF, the excellence of execution. You talk about a guy that leads by design. I mean, there is none better than them. Who are you going with here? Who is your coach of the year?
Yeah, I agree with you on Kevin O'Connell. It was clear that team overachieved for the amount of talent that they had. Not that they didn't have a good roster, but especially with the deficiencies that kind of reared their head at the end. I thought Kevin O'Connell did a real good job. And remember, it's a regular season award, so the fact they get dumped out of the playoffs in round one is not relevant, though it weighs heavy on a lot of our minds, I'm sure. Dan Campbell, I think, is a great choice here. But because his coordinators were so good, because both of them are up for assistant coach of the year, I don't think he'll quite get the credit he deserves. And that leads me to Andy Reid, too, because, how many years are we going to talk about that Chiefs team and say they're more vulnerable than they've ever been? They look like they can be had this year. They're not as dominant as they were in years past. And, oh, by the way, they won 15 games. They're the number one overall seed. And, if you look at their entire operation, you just got to hand it to Big Red. He's the only redeeming factor of that team, if you ask me. He was why way back when they were playing the Patriots and trying to take down that dynasty, I was rooting for him because you love Big Red and you love what he does. So, there's a part of me that wants to say Andy Reid deserves it as kind of lifetime achievement award, for lack of a better term, but the man always is going to have, for the rest of his career, because he'll retire before Mahomes does, I think. For the rest of his career, he's going to have great teams.
You hope so.
For the rest of his career, he's going to have great teams, and it's at one point or another, I think he deserves a little bit of credit for what's going on there.
Certainly. I mean, same thing with Sean McDermott. Sean McDermott, I think, is the fact that he was not in the running here is crazy to me. I mean, It's tough when you got who's also in that mix, but incredible stuff there. I'm not going to, come back at the play of the year. I don't, to be honest with you, really want to touch on it. As much as DeMar Hamlin's in there, I kind of feel like I'm going to get a lot of heat for this, whatever, I don't care. I feel like they did that to kind of make amends for the fact that he should have won it last year.
100% they did.
Yeah, I don't really love the idea of it. I mean, if anybody like J.K. Dobbins, great. If we're going to talk about how, last year Flacco won it because he came back, well, then Sam Darnold should win it this year because he came from being a nobody like Geno Smith did a couple years ago and took that team to damn near the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but I don't think Hamlin's just nominated because as a make good. I think he's going to win it as a make good. And and I think part of that also has to do with the fact that it's probably his last year wearing a Bills jersey. So all those pictures, all those memories, all that kind of stuff, it's going to change when he's got a Bengals jersey on next year. You know what I mean? So, so I think you're right. I think it's going to be a make good for last year, which is kind of a shame.
Do you have a favorite for offensive rookie of the year? You got Brock Bowers, Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Bo Nix, and Brian Thomas Jr.
My favorite is Bo Nix because I placed a bet on him in August, but but I don't think he's the one that's going to win it. I think Jaden Daniels ran away with it. That comeback game versus the Eagles, I think, really sealed it for him in the regular season. If you're just looking at like impact of numbers, I mean, Brock Bowers was insane. He did stuff no rookie tight end has ever done or probably will ever do again. I think you look at two quarterbacks who were both rookies, who both led their team to the playoffs. Again, just the regular season award. So Washington's impressive run in the playoffs, notwithstanding, but yeah, I think Jaden pulled it out. I think he, through the course of the year, really just his poise in the face of anything. I mean, he really looked like
a stone cold killer
there. Yeah, and changed that franchise, TD.
Yeah, no, I agree. I told somebody the other day, Jaden Daniels literally he's got that like look in his eye, like a murderer, like a serial killer. Like you don't see that out of rookies all that often. And he didn't look in the biggest games. The kid never looked shook, which is an incredible attribute to have because in football, you've seen how many quarterbacks have crumbled, you know, the whole adage of seeing ghosts or, you know, guys that just, it seems like the game is just too big. It's moving too fast. The lights are too bright. Like whatever cliche you want to use, it just happens. It never happened for Jaden Daniels. The kid is cool as the other side of the pillow. I'm using all the cliches tonight. He was so darn good. And you have to give it to him to get that team to the NFC Championship. Granted, they got the brakes beaten off of them by a very good Eagles team. Getting there and turning that franchise around in 1 year, what a testament to the coaching, but even more so, you know, what a testament to that quarterback. Jaden Daniels did an incredible job. Yeah, but speaking about quarterbacks, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, to your point, I mean, not every quarterback who's a starter even has the ice in their veins quite like Jaden does. You know, there's some guys you can point to like Joe Burrow who, you know, the heart rate, the blood pressure just does not rise. But like you saw Josh, he was tight at the beginning of that AFC championship game. Like not everybody has that demeanor about him. Kids got something special. Jaden Daniels has something special for that kind of thing.
It's a little terrifying, the look that was in Josh's eye. Like you could see an unsettled feeling in there. And that was, you could very quickly tell that something was a little astir. So, but speaking of Josh Allen and the quarterbacks, even though technically Saquon Barkley is in this, but you might as well just not. The most valuable player. This is a highly contested, highly talked about, very, very, very tight race between two incredible quarterbacks. I mean, I watched Lamar Jackson. I'm a Syracuse fan, so I watched him back when he was playing against Louisville and Syracuse. Incredible year. He has done things this year that I never, and this is nothing against him as a quarterback, I never thought he would do this year. I mean, he was terrific. And then Josh Allen did things this year that nobody thought he would do, throwing as few interceptions. He had the least amount of turnover-worthy plays this year of any quarterback. 4% of plays that were for a loss, for a sack, or for a turnover. I mean, incredible stuff for a guy that was his biggest knock, was his inability to keep control of the ball, not making dumb mistakes. And then you got, Saquon Barkley had an incredible year, almost was, on the run for Eric Dickerson. Joe Burrow, if he didn't have a terrible team around him, if the Bengals were any bit good, Joe Burrow would have blown the doors off of this race. I mean, the statistics that he had this year were just ludicrous. I mean, quite frankly, just dumb. Like Drew Brees circa 2005.
But here's the thing with that. Now, I'm interested in your take on this, TD, because I feel like there's one guy who's like that every year. And part of it is because his record was terrible. Mm-hmm. I mean, he had to go laser show most of those games because they're just trying to make up points. They're trying to score. They're trying to come from behind. Whereas, Lamar Jackson to a lesser extent, and it's actually, it bears it out if you look at the number of snaps and that kind of stuff. But Lamar Jackson to a lesser extent, but Josh Allen to a very large extent, they're not playing every fourth quarter. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like they're in the third quarter when they're up by 20, they're running the ball 8 times and they're just not throwing the ball as much. And so, I think there are plenty of guys capable of putting up the numbers that Joe Burrow did if they had to keep their foot on the pedal all the time. But, the fact that his team was so bad, I feel like skews those numbers a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I talked about, and we'll talk about Myles Garrett in a little bit. I've said the same thing about Myles Garrett. When you're playing on a bad team, your stats are not what they're supposed to be. And the same thing with Joe Burrow. You're not going to be running the ball, right? They're not going to be using their power running back just to try to get some extra yards. You knew they were going to throw through the air. And to be honest with you, and one thing I've said about him, he better damn well have those stats when you got Jamar Chase and
Sure.
T. Higgins. Last year was Tyler Boyd. They have Mike Gesicki, Andre Ishavas, like very talented wide receiver core.
Sure. Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. But to me, that's, a guy that doesn't even make the playoffs. I should rephrase that. A quarterback that doesn't even make the playoffs, as close as they were. I think you can throw out him as a candidate for me, at least. I wouldn't vote for him there.
Right.
I would vote for Saquon over him because I do
certainly.
think Saquon carried that team. But I do think those guys are 3 and 4 in the race. I got to be honest with you. I really think, and maybe I'm setting myself up for disappointment here, but I really think, there's going to be some voters who split and wanted to give the first team All-Pro to Lamar Jackson to recognize his incredible numbers that he put up. And then in the spirit of the name, most valuable player, are going to vote for Josh as MVP because if you look at the two of them, I think you can look at it objectively and say, yeah, Lamar had better numbers this year, and you can give him the first team All-Pro because he was that incredible when you're talking about who's the best quarterback. But when you're talking about who's more valuable to their team, I don't think it's hard to say I'm going to vote Lamar Jackson first team All-Pro, which the reason this is important for people who don't know, the voters who vote first team All-Pro are the same people who vote for MVP. So for years, if you won first team All-Pro as quarterback, you were likely the winner of the MVP. I think the last 13 times or something like that. But I think there's going to be a split this year because I think based on the definition of the two of them, you can find your way to voting Lamar first team All-Pro and Josh most valuable for the NFL honors tonight.
Yeah, and as of Polymarket right now has Josh Allen 91% to win MVP tonight.
Yeah, dude.
Just think the odds have absolutely flipped. They were at 53% earlier tonight. The last 3 hours, they have just absolutely toppled into Josh's direction.
Well, it's because Haley Steinfeld's in that little black dress. Did you see that?
My wife is probably watching, but yes, she looks terrific tonight.
She had some real nice things to say about Buffalo, too. It was cool to see that interview from her. I don't know if you caught that, but there's a clip of her online talking about Buffalo and how much she loves the people there. So it's cool that she embraced the town a little bit.
You could definitely tell she has brought a different glint to Josh's eye. We do have one of the awards have already come in. The assistant coach of the year has gone to Detroit Lions, now Chicago Bears head coach Ben Johnson.
Oh, really? I'm surprised. I really thought that him and Glenn were going to split the I like Detroit vote there. So that's surprising to me, but good for him. Listen, honestly, everybody in that category, they're all excellent coaches, of course. So
absolutely. Yeah. So, I gotta, like I said, with Polymarket, I got to think Josh, the one thing I kept bringing up because the narratives kept changing and this, we all know this, the conversations the week of the Ravens game was just some of the most toxic nonsense bullshit that I don't want to revisit that week. And I hope that we don't have to do that dance again. But the narratives that were just spinning about the MVP and why Lamar should win over Josh, the moments, was it the stats, whatever it was, like you said, Sterling and I have talked about this. I've talked about this implicitly with other people at work. any which way you spin it, cannot give an MVP to a guy who has a 2,000-yard rusher in his backfield.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't do it. Like, and you want to compare it? Like, they were like, oh, well, James Cook had that impact with Josh. James Cook had half his yards. He had 1,000 yards in comparison to 2,000 yards. And even more so, you saw in that AFC divisional game the impact of Derrick Henry alone. You saw it. You saw, and I get it was playoffs. It has no bearing on the MVP. But you saw that in prime time, the two quarterbacks against each other. And obviously it's not quarterback versus quarterback, but you saw the impact of what Derrick Henry had on that game plan. That tells you what happened for 17 weeks. Derrick Henry was the reason that Lamar Jackson was so, and Lamar Jackson helped each other, but it's just night and day.
Which is why I think you can find your way to, statistically saying, oh, he deserves to be first team all pro, but he's not the most valuable. When you look at the stats, you can say he deserves the recognition and the honor. But when you're talking about most valuable, I don't think there's anybody else on the Bills offense that would be up for any other award. I mean, maybe if they created what Dawkins wanted, some kind of offensive lineman award, they'd have somebody up for that. But they just don't. You know what I mean? There's no star power on that offense. So yeah, I would not find it hard to believe at all if Josh walks away with the MVP award tonight. And I know, listen, I live here in Denver. We had two MVPs in the same city last year with Nikola Jokic and Nathan McKinnon, and 0 banners came along with it. And it was kind of a tough pill to swallow because you wanted to celebrate the incredible season that those guys had. But there was this sense of failure along with it. So I wanted to ask you, TD, if he does bring home the award this week without even winning an AFC title. There's no banner going up anywhere. There's not even an AFC champion banner going up somewhere. How do you feel if he does win the MVP? Does it feel kind of like an empty season because we didn't hang a banner anywhere?
No, it's disappointing, right? Like, of course you want that end goal, but, and I've said this many times, when Josh's career is said and done, when you look back in the annals of time and you look at each quarterback or each player in the NFL and what they did, an MVP, an all-pro, those are things that are synonymous with a guy's name forever. They don't go away. Yeah. Those are accolades that really add and have a concrete value to a person, right? And the big thing for Josh Allen is going from a guy that went from Fireball, California to JUCO to Wyoming, drafted 7th, but was definitely considered a project. He was very raw, to then really ascending to being the second best quarterback in the game. Having this is a testament to the work done. Is it not done? No, but Josh has a lot of time left, right? Do we think he probably has 10 more years? Probably. So you have 10 years of him having a crack at the Super Bowl. We don't know if every year he's going to have a crack at the MVP, right? There might be 5. We saw a couple years ago, Aaron Rodgers, when Josh Allen had his best year, 2 years in a row, Aaron Rodgers was like, nah, sorry, kid, I'm better. That can happen. Josh Allen can have another MVP caliber year, but somebody just has these bonkers stats that there's nothing Josh can do. So having this year, regardless of what Ravens fans might say, whatever beliefs they may have, at least 10, 20, 30 years down the line, when we're talking to our kids, you can sit there and say, Josh Allen was an MVP. Yeah. He was a damn good quarterback. There is something that, God forbid if he never wins a Super Bowl. And I hope that for our case, because who knows when it will happen if it doesn't happen with Josh. But if it doesn't, at least his time as a quarterback in Buffalo has something attached that means something. It's not just lip service. It's legitimate, awesome football play that is now handcuffed with one of the most prestigious awards in all of sports.
Yeah, and to your point about Ravens fans talking, it did get toxic, and you hate that because when you're talking about these guys, I am a huge Lamar Jackson fan. I was a huge Lamar Jackson fan during that draft. It was one of the things I was saying, wait till the second round and pick him because I think he's going to be fantastic. Right. You hate how toxic it got because there's no part of it that I mean, you're talking about two incredible players, right? Like you don't not believe in one of them or the other one. You're just splitting hairs trying to decide who was the most valuable this season, And so when you're talking about legacy, you're talking about one guy who's already got two. And I do think that plays into it a little bit where, 4 seasons in a row of 40 touchdowns and all that kind of stuff. Do any of the voters think to themselves, like, let's make sure Josh gets one here? To your point, you know what I mean? Because he deserves it, and he might have deserved it a couple other years where Aaron Rodgers gets it or Lamar Jackson won one, and maybe Josh deserved those. So let's get him one. I do think that plays into career validation, for lack of a better point. I do think that kind of plays into the thought of a lot of the voters. So.
And we've seen it before where the guy who didn't get all pro, got all second team all pro, ended up winning the MVP. So this is not, new waters that they're going into. This has happened. And like you said, maybe you scratch my back, I scratch yours. You give one, the all pro first team, and then you give one the MVP. And to be honest with you, if you gave Lamar the MVP again, it doesn't look great. It really doesn't. Like, as good as his year was, then what do you say about last year? And then there's too many just kind of like unfinished just details about the last 2 years together that if you gave them both to Lamar, now you're putting a lot of stuff in question. And then there's not like, how do you define what the MVP is anymore? Because those 2 years are so different. You had a really good year from Lamar, and then like last year, it was not a great year. It was probably one of the most underwhelming years for a quarterback in MVP history. So not great, but I think Josh is going to win it tonight. So that is a terrific start, at least for the evening. But before we get any further, obviously we are just a couple days from the biggest game of the year. And I know you and myself and Sterling, I don't know if anybody really cares about watching the game on Sunday, but let's touch on it real quick. The game itself, you have the Chiefs going for their three-peat. Big time matchup, right? This is legacy defining for the Kansas City Chiefs, a game that, no team has ever won 3, ever. It's never happened. This is huge for sports in general. This is Michael Jordan, right? This is one of those moments. What do the Eagles have to do to thwart the Chiefs in their quest for 3? What needs to happen?
That's the interesting thing to me, because what the Eagles need to do is exactly what they have done all year long. And it's run the football. James Cook ended up with, 8.6 yards a touch or something like that. Saquon Barkley needs to eat that defense alive. And how do you neutralize a great defensive lineman? You run the ball right at him. So you run the ball at Chris Jones and you try to eat up those linebackers, and you hit a deep shot over the top once or twice. It's so frustrating because they always seem to do it against the Bills, but it's an offense that has trouble scoring 30 points. So if you're the Eagles, you defensively, I think they're incredibly talented and, can make hay that way as well. But at the end of the day, you put up 30 points and I think you win. So feed Saquon Barkley the rock and just try to wear that defense out, I think is the best game plan that they can have.
Yeah, you leaning into Saquon, you saw what he what he did against the Washington Commanders. He absolutely looked he looked like the best running back in the game. He looked like he should be in the MVP running. Like, he played with his hair on fire, making just everybody miss, doing things that only Saquon Barkley can do. And you saw, like you said, with James Cook had his way. And Saquon Barkley, as much as I love James Cook, Saquon Barkley he is in a different league than James Cook, at least as this moment. So you see that should be something they lean into. Ian, stop moving that mouse. You're driving me nuts. It's over my face. It's distracting the hell out of me with whatever's going on right there. But if you look at this game, you got to cause pressure up front. You got to get Foreman in front. And I think if you do that, I think you win. I really do. The Bills could not create pressure. They couldn't get any interior pressure. Patrick Mahomes was able to step up. I mean, I heard, you guys were talking about this on your show. Greg Rousseau was very ineffective, was not able to contain. AJ Epinesa has been all but a bust in terms of getting that contract. I mean, he was ineffective. Von Miller, ineffective, like outside of maybe one or two plays. So if you can get that defensive line to hem in, and Brandon Graham also might be playing, which is a huge ad for them, then you got that secondary. And with Darius Slay and Cooper DeJean, like so much talent on that back end that the Eagles, they've got enough on defense. And then that offense, AJ Brown, not Deshaun Jackson, excuse me. Devonta Smith, excuse me. And then Saquon Barkley, you got Dallas Goedert at tight end. Like they've got so much talent. And then you also have to worry about the running of Jalen Hurts, and I think that's something that the Bills, quite frankly, sorely missed on taking advantage of. The lack of using Josh Allen's legs in that AFC Championship. You got to do that against the Chiefs. I think if you use speed against them like they used against you, I think you've got an advantage. Their defense is significantly better than Buffalo. We talked about, the nature of having difference makers. The Eagles have difference makers, multiple on both sides of the ball. AJ Brown, Saquon Barkley, two huge difference makers on the defensive side of the ball. Cooper DeJean, Jalen Carter, like massive difference makers. That's what you need to be able to beat a Chiefs team who has Hall of Famers littered across that roster. So I think they do that. I think that's the recipe, just like you said, to being able to take this team down.
Well, and to your point, when we're talking about the trenches, I loved the Bills' offensive line versus that Chiefs' defensive line. I thought that was an easy win for that matchup. And I liked the Eagles' offensive line better than the Bills' offensive line. Might be the only one in the league that I like better than the Bills' offensive line. They got an incredible offensive line. And then you mentioned some of their blue chippers on the defensive line as well. I think
Mm-hmm.
control the game script a little bit, I think, to decide who's going to win a Super Bowl. So.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think it's going to come down to very much like with the Bills against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. If they were able to play not mistake-free football, but better football, more sound football, and not make those crucial, just bad decisions, untimely mistakes, the Bills win that game. I mean, that game was not out of hand. And unfortunately, a lot of it was left in the ref's hands, but it was because of bad decisions. Like how many times on that last drive, they just did not use the run. The run was effective all game long, and Josh threw 3 straight passes. I mean, at a certain point, you got to use your bread and butter and what's effective, and they just didn't. So
I haven't really gotten to talk to you about the game, TD.
Sure.
It felt to me like if you're the Bills, you're sitting there a couple different times with a lead and the ball, and you had opportunities to foot on throat, you know what I mean, to really take over that situation and didn't do it. How did you feel about it?
Every single time when you look at the Buffalo Bills throughout this season, it seemed like Sean McDermott had that killer mentality. Like he wasn't playing scared anymore. And I thought that was a change, like an evolution of a coach that a lot of people thought wasn't the guy. And I thought that was something that was good. Like you saw that Sean was willing to go the distance. And it just felt like in this game, it just felt it felt too cautious, And when you're playing the Chiefs, a team who, in the past you had to be perfect against. I don't think that was as much this time. I don't think you had to be perfect because that team was flawed, but you also couldn't be, you couldn't make the mistakes they made or do the things they did unless you were perfect on offense, and they just weren't. When you start off the game and you go 3 and out and you give the ball back to the Chiefs and you let them just walk down the field the way they did, 9 plays, 90 yards, not a good recipe for success. So, there was a lot of empty calories in that game, a lot of decisions that I think left a lot of us playoffs. And it's not always easy when you're playing teams, especially the Chiefs, who are on legendary ground right now, doing things that legends have done. You're not going to just skate in and make everything perfect. It's not going to be an easy game plan. Everything's not going to go hunky dory. But man, for a team that did so much offensively this year, they just look so damn pedestrian, and it all comes down to Josh. Like, I'm sorry, like, as people want to blame the defense, but you have 3 minutes and 33 seconds with 3 timeouts at the end of the game. And I told Bills fans all the time, you asked me in the beginning of the year before the season started, if you were in the AFC Championship and you had 3 minutes and 33 seconds with 3 timeouts, the ball's in Josh's hands, you're down by 3. How do you feel? And most Bills fans would say, great.
Yeah.
We're going to win. We're going to go to the Super Bowl. Yeah. Like, I would literally pay to have that happen every year for the next 15 years.
It's exactly what I said to Sterls. I would have signed in blood for it. If you told me that was the scenario, I would have signed in blood for it. And for the people that want to blame the defense, man,
they got the stop when they needed to.
That's what I said to Sterls. And he's like, no, man, they still gave up a field goal. I'm like, no, they held them to 3 points and gave themselves a chance to drive down the field and win that game. And I know it didn't work out, but I don't know. I mean, to your point, while you were talking, I thought to myself, that is a legendary team and they are doing legendary things. And it just makes me like, I just want to pause Bills fans and say, like, look how close you were. And you didn't play a perfect game. And Josh Allen did not play his best game. And you made a bunch of mistakes. And you still were right there. If Josh played his best game, you win that game. If you don't make a couple mistakes here and there, you win that game. And all said, you still had a chance at the end, 3 minutes and 30 seconds and 3 timeouts, to drive down the field and win the game. Man, it hurts, but at the same time, I think it gives me a lot of hope for the team next year because all those pieces are coming back. Everybody's coming back. So go get the 1 seed. Give yourself the rest for the first time during this run, which you haven't done yet, and get all those games at home and see if you can't get it done, man.
By the way, Joe Brady came in 5th in voting. It was Ben Johnson, Brian Flores, Aaron Glenn, Vic Fangio, Joe Brady. So the Lions coordinators both 1 and 2 there is what you're saying? Wow. Yeah. Yep. And Joe Brady had 2 first place votes. So, yep. But speaking of that, being back next year, let's segue. We talk about next year and getting over the hump, getting into the Super Bowl, beating what would assume to be the Chiefs, right? They have been the gold standard. They've been in the AFC Championship every year that Patrick Mahomes has been here because, of course, football gods want to kill us. They want us to go from Brady to Patrick Mahomes and let us die in misery. So, that being said, let's talk about the big rumors. The big rumor this week was Myles Garrett asking for a trade from the Cleveland Browns. I had mentioned a week or so ago that I thought that was, before this all came out, that if I was going to go and do a big splash move, it was going to be Myles Garrett. I thought a guy in a Browns team that has 0 direction, 0 cap, like their whole situation is just an absolute tire fire. I thought it was a perfect move because what do the Bills need? What have they needed for a long time is defensive pressure. They need somebody on the defensive line that is an elite level blue chip talent that can change the trajectory of a game. So let's talk about Myles Garrett, Robbie. Let's talk about him.
All right.
what is your feeling on the potential of Bills going big game hunting after Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott both said we lack difference makers on both sides of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, so what they've done is they've refilled the overall roster with just some really good talent, some really good players. And it's incredible that they've done that without high picks in the first round. They've hit on a lot of late round picks and gotten quality NFL starters at a lot of places. And there is something to be said for that.
Right.
But the next evolution is, like you said, bringing in some blue chip players, and they know it. You can't just have Josh Allen be your only blue chipper and expect to be competing for a Super Bowl every year, even though you will. You want to get over that hump, you need another guy. So I am all for them going out and trying to get a couple blue chip guys. Can you get a disgruntled wide receiver? Do you not want to do that because you're worried about throwing off the vibe in the locker room? Can you get a disgruntled pass rusher? Do you not want to do that because you're worried about throwing off the vibe, So for me, listen, I think Myles Garrett, no doubt, is that, right? Like, he is a blue chip guy who can change a football game. I throw some caution in there for two reasons. One, what is it going to cost you? And I don't just mean that in terms of to acquire him, because I'm all for using your assets that you have right now to go get a guy like that. But the deal and the cap space you're going to have to eat up while bringing him here. If you told me that you would bring him here and just let him sit on the last 2 years of his deal, which the acquiring team would have, I think it was like 18 million one year and 13 million the next year, great, fine. But he's going to want a new deal when he comes in. And I just worry about you getting in the same position that you're in with Von Miller right now, where you're looking at a 36-year-old who's the number 2 cap hit on your team. And it really is kind of hampering your ability to go out and get some blue chip players. So I don't want you to put yourself in that situation again. Especially when he's 29, he'll be 29 during most of next season. So if you give him a 5-year deal, you get to age 35 with him having a big cap number. Maybe I feel a little bit better about doing that with somebody like Max Crosby, who's only 27. Yeah, I feel like that might be a better way to go. And then Sturls did a dirty thing to me while we were on the podcast the other day and mentioned that Micah Parsons needs a deal and is 25 years old. And God, the things I would give up to put Micah Parsons on this team for the next 7 to 10 years. You know what I mean? So I agree about getting a blue chipper, TD. I think they need a couple. I think they need to go find themselves 1 or 2 of them.
Let me ask you 2 questions, and I'm going to kind of frame this in such a way that it'll eventually change your mind, because I believe that we need Myles Garrett. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep pushing that narrative, because I'm neurotic and I believe in myself. So that being said, 2 things. Do you believe that if they were to trade, and we don't know exactly what the package might look like for Myles Garrett, we've heard all different iterations of what it could be, but do you believe a first-round pick this year and a first-round pick next year have the same impact or potential impact as what as Myles Garrett is going to give you right now?
Not even close. But that's not the only question, right? Because this is a team who's at the start of what we're calling a second window, right? This is the rebuilt version of the Bills. So I would answer that by asking you, if they picked a guy and picked the right guy, or even, and we talked about this a little bit on our IG too, if they traded up and picked a guy, if they got into the top 10 and picked a guy up there, could that guy have the same impact in 3 years that Myles Garrett would have next year?
So let me ask you this. Myles Garrett has 2 years of control on your contract, 2 very, very, very reasonable years. on his contract. Let's say you extend him an additional 3 and make that a 5-year contract, make him very, very wealthy, rightfully so. A guy that by most accounts, Cleveland people are saying this, he is ascending, not descending. Defensive ends generally age very, very well. And at this point, a guy like Myles Garrett, who hasn't missed a game in 2 years, generally plays through injuries, has missed almost no time in his career, minus a couple fluke injuries. Would you believe?
And hitting a dude with a helmet.
Right. Very defensively minded. In those 5 years, right? Because if, let's say, we took that first round pick this coming year, you have a 5-year contract. Sure. Do you think that Myles Garrett over the next 5 years is going to be more impactful than a 30 pick in the first round this year will be?
Well, you're assuming it's just going to take one first round pick?
Well, I'm saying right now you have this first round, and let's say they do trade 2, right? And then you're talking that second one has a year outside of Myles Garrett's 5-year contract. Are you willing to bring a guy like Myles Garrett, who more than likely, because we've seen the first round picks that we've had outside of Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds, most of them haven't even come even a modicum close to what Myles Garrett is, and probably will never, right? Like Kyer Elam, huge bust. Greg Rousseau probably won't come close to him. Ed Oliver probably won't come close to him. Like, not great. So,
yeah.
Like, if we're being fair and we want to win a Super Bowl, I want to win one. You want to win one. Ian wants to win one. Sterls want to win one. Every Bills fan wants to win one. Would you be willing, because we should still be able to sign some key pieces. Maybe you might not be able to sign 1 or 2, but if you know now that you can win a Super Bowl in the next couple of years because a guy like Myles Garrett can make that type of impact, doesn't that trump you're starting at the front of a new window?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Part of it is what the deal is. What do you have to give up? And like I said, I'm okay with using heavy draft capital to do it, because I do believe that, like you're saying, at where you're drafting, you're not going to be able to get a blue chip player in the way that Myles Garrett is. And so it's something that the Eagles have done incredibly well for years, is maneuver on the draft board and get themselves up to get blue chip players, trade to get guys like A.J. Brown. You know what I mean? They've done pretty well with that in Philadelphia. And I think that's kind of the model that you have to look at if you're Brandon Beane is, we now have a good base, a good team. We've got to go get some blue chippers. So no, I don't disagree with your premise overall. But, you could also use all that draft capital to move up and get Travis Hunter. Right? Oh, see, look at
I love Travis Hunter. I love the potential of what you can do with him. Yeah. That Deion Sanders has, playing offense, defense, all that stuff. You are not going to that's not even close to the amount of stuff it would take to get from 30 to 1.
If I told you that it was 2 first rounds, a third round, and a player for either Myles Garrett, or to get all the way up and select in the top 3 and take Travis Hunter, which one would you pick?
Myles Garrett.
Really?
Yeah, because Myles Garrett is a proven commodity. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer who right now is not slowing down. And if I know, I love Travis Hunter, but Travis Hunter played at Colorado and has never played it down in the NFL. And we don't know what he is. There's a lot of guys that have looked really good in college that have translated and looked really bad in the pros. So, if I'm looking at it, I'm going to say, I'm going to go get the guy that is a proven asset, a guy that is a game wrecker. People want to be like, oh, Joe Tooney held Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett had 12 pressures against the Chiefs in week 11. 12 pressures. The Bills had 14.
I've also seen him shut down by Garrett Bowles. You know what I mean? And it happens sometimes like that in the NFL. But
certainly does. But he also has 102 and a half sacks. And literally has on pace to beat the best defensive end our team has ever seen by a literally country mile.
Yeah. Here's what I'll say to you. This is kind of where I land on how good I would feel about it if they made the deal. There's 2 things that are important to me. One, I want you to pay off the debt this year. So if you go get Myles Garrett, I do not want you to give up next year's first. If you give up a first, a second, one of your seconds, and maybe a fifth this year, I'm fine with it. But I want you to pay the entire bill this year.
What if you what if you kept your first this year and gave up next year's first?
I don't know that I'd love that, because I think your first next year is more likely to be 32 than 30 if you get Myles Garrett on the team, right? So I would probably I'd want to pay the bill all this year. And then second of all, and I've seen this floated around a lot, the trade can't involve Groot for me.
No. Okay.
I think you got to find a way to pay both of them, because if you are going to maximize what you get out of Myles Garrett and maximize what you get out of Greg Rousseau, it's having them both on the field at the same time. And that is a terrifying prospect, I think, for offenses. So if you're going to do it, I want you to go with the New York Giants route and just have an absolute monster of a defensive line and have them both on the field at the same time.
You want Strahan, Tuck, Osium, Yora, JPP type. Yeah. Okay. I understand that. And that's fair. And that's my thing is, like, people, like they said, Max Crosby. And listen, I want to be very clear. I love Max Crosby, but Max Crosby is not the same as Myles Garrett. Max Crosby is a terrific defensive end. Terrific. Myles Garrett is literally the closest thing right now that we have seen to Bruce Smith, to a guy, to the greatest defensive end outside of him and Reggie White, the two greatest to ever do it. That's how good Myles Garrett is. Like, Max Crosby is 50 sacks behind Myles Garrett and has played 22 less games. I don't know about math to you, but that's bonkers stats.
I agree with you. What I would say is, and I think Myles Garrett has done everybody chasing him a favor by saying, I'm requesting a trade, I'm leaving. Sure. But my original response to that would have been, Myles Garrett's going to cost you more than Max Crosby will. And that is something where, the difference in the two of them between the players, is it worth the extra cost? Now, I think Myles Garrett's cost has come down given what he's done. So I agree with you. I mean, he is no doubt a better player, but if you put Max Crosby across from Groot and can pay both of them, I think that's similarly as effective and terrifying for defense or for offenses as putting Myles Garrett across from Groot.
See, I don't agree. I love Max Crosby. I think his never-ending motor is desirable. He fits Buffalo like a glove. Yes. I mean, he is literally a Buffalo blue, through and through type of guy. He would fit here so well. Fans would love him. He would retire here. He'd be perfect. But you're paying, it's like going to a dealership and saying, I'm going to buy a Mercedes or I'm going to buy a Toyota Camry, and say
don't know. It's like, am I going to buy a Mercedes or am I going to buy a Ford F-150? I think is be fair to Max Crosby.
Sure. Okay. My point was a very good car, right? Like, that is a very, very good defensive end, where Myles Garrett is like so high above everybody else. I mean, the only person that's close to him is TJ Watt, right? And you're paying, yes, you're going to pay more, but you are going to get exponentially more. You're getting that bang for the buck. And that's what I'm like. If I'm going to start sending assets, I'm going the goddamn distance. Like, listen, look at the Rams. Look at Les Snead. Look at Sean McVay. They were a couple of years ago, won the Super Bowl because they said, screw it, screw them picks, we're going for it. And now they tore it down and they were right back in it. Right back in it.
Yeah.
If you have a good GM, you have a good we have a quarterback. So, I mean, at the very minimum, you're going to be good, right? Every single year. Josh Allen accounts for 8 to 10 wins every single season at very minimum. So,
but TD,
go all in.
I feel like this is what Sterls and I talked about on Tuesday. I feel like that might be next year.
But why is it next year? Why is it next year when wasn't this past year the rebuild? Isn't now? Aren't you now devoid of any you can't sit there and say, Bills fans are not going to be They're not going to sit there and say, well, there's nothing. You got that this year was your get out of free jail card, where the Bills fans are going to be okay with losing. I mean, they weren't, but like, you're okay losing in the AFC Championship. That's gone next year. You have no more grace.
But if you want to lay one more year of a solid draft on top of what you've built to lead you to saying fuck those picks and getting rid of all of them and going and finding quality NFL players that you can trade for, even though they might be a little bit older. I mean, if that's a 2-year plan, I don't mind that per se. I wouldn't wait, but I could understand it. That being said, defensive end isn't the only place that you can go and get a blue chip guy.
Right.
And so the
problem for me though is you're talking 2 years.
Blue chip guy.
The problem is for 2 years from now, when you're talking about if you want to just lay it down this next year and then go for it the following year, you have, and I'm going to read this off. This is what they have to do next in 2 years of free agents from the Buffalo Bills.
Oh yeah.
Daquan Jones, Connor McGovern, AJ Epinesa, David Edwards, Greg Rousseau, Cam Lewis, Sam Martin, James Cook, Terrell Bernard, KJ Hamler, Jalen Virgil, Ryan Vandermark, Khalil Shakir, Jamarcus Ingram, Christian Benford, Balin Speck. Like, those are big names, big time names. I am of the belief if you have a year, and they did that with Von Miller, we are absolutely swinging for the fences, like this, like the Les Snead go for it type of deal. If you're the Buffalo Bills in this moment, I'm not sure there is a more pressing issue than defensive line. Every year we talk about it. One position that Brandon Beane has literally and Sean McDermott have scoured, whether it was the Greg Rousseau and Boogie Basham draft or getting Von Miller or, signing all these guys, bringing in Dwayne Smoot, bringing back Quentin Jefferson, bringing back Jordan Phillips. Like, they have turned every stone and more, and they're not done because what they did, and I'm not going to give Sterling credit to this. I'm still thinking it's Josh Allen, but to the ineffectiveness of this defensive line was very evident through a lot of the games this year. Thank God you have Josh Allen who can score an absolute shit ton of points, because if you didn't, that defense was not going to do you any favors, and that starts up front, right? Like, let me be fair. Kyrie Elam was absolute dog shit in that game. Everybody knows it. He looked out of place. He looked like he was from a D3 college that should have never been playing in football. And I don't even know if that's giving him the right credit. But if that defensive line got a modicum of pressure against Patrick Mahomes, that may have allowed that secondary to have a extra second of at least time to cover, which means the world when it comes to a game script. But they didn't, because there was no pressure whatsoever on Patrick Mahomes, albeit he was getting the ball out in 0.3 seconds. So in some points it didn't matter, but you still need to speed up his process. You need to heat him up to a degree, and they just couldn't.
I disagree with you a little bit. And Strohls and I did yell about this on Tuesday. Everybody's on the defensive line for losing that game. And I think there's one player you can point to that lost that game, and we all know who it is. Even if you would have sped him up, 15 was back there and just looking for where Kyrie Elam was and throwing the ball. It was his first read. He was going there every time, no question. And that's how he went up and down the field a couple different drives. So even if you could have heated him up, I don't think it would have made a difference in those situations. Overall, I don't disagree with your point. And I know they've got that 22 draft class, Cook, Bernard, Shakir, Benford, those guys are all going to come up for contract extensions at the same time. And then you can throw Groot in there from the year before because he had the 5th-year option. You're going to have to find a way to pay most of those guys, if not all of them. That's why I'm concerned about going and getting a guy like Myles Garrett and then giving him some kind of earth-shattering deal. But it's interesting. You've made me waffle back and forth here, even just during this conversation. In my head, I would have to know what the price is. It really does matter to me because, like you
Certainly.
said, for the 2 years that he has on there, it's a hell of a deal. I mean, if you could bring him in and say, "Hey, we're going to run with it next year and see what it looks like, and then maybe we'll give you an extension before the final year of your deal," I would probably love that. But you could have a guy like Trey Hendrickson, who's a free agent next year. Available on the market. So I don't know. I mean, it's a tough call. It didn't work out when you did it with Vaughn. He was playing really well, but it ended up putting you in a bad cap situation. And I know it's unfair because he got hurt.
But here's the thing: you can't live in that moment because that ether that's the same idea. Like if you live in that same moment, you're gonna have teams. Right. Like, let's say we thought that way forever. You went and got EJ Manuel, right? And you're like, well, we went up and took EJ Manuel. We can't do this again. You're never going to do that. You have to keep swinging because at the end of the day, you need to take these chances. And like Von Miller had a pretty terrific start to his career with Buffalo and had the freakiest of freak injuries when somebody stepped on his ankle. Like it's not going to happen, but it did happen. Like the most Billsy thing, of course, but you can't to use that as a rationale as to why not to go after one of the greatest defensive ends to ever play the game, currently the best in the league. I think it's playing scared, right? Like I don't know if you play poker, but like you play scared, you're going to lose. Like if you play scared in the NFL, you're not good. Like that's how bad teams stay bad. Like I'm sorry, but like first round picks to me, what are they? It's the 30th pick. The 30th pick in the first round. You're betting on traits, and like I'll be honest with you, I don't love Brandon Beane betting on traits. Like I love Brandon Beane's drafting from like second round on or like third round on, but like if I can get an absolute bona fide stud, like a game wrecking, game changing, whatever cliche you want to utilize to really to describe a guy like Myles Garrett, I'm willing to get rid of first round picks because at this point, first round picks are going to take, unless you find, and how often you find at the 30th pick, a guy that's going to step right in, like a JJ Watt, right? Like how often are they going to step right in and make just an impact like Myles Garrett or two of them or in a couple of years? I don't have time to wait anymore. I just don't. I don't have that time. I need immediate action.
We do have time to wait. We do.
We don't though. 2 years from now, like I just said, we have 1 million free agents and Josh Allen is only 29.
That's why you need the cheap contracts. You're making an argument for the draft picks.
Right, but if it's 2 first, if it's this year's first and next year's first, you still have 9 picks this year. You still have 9 picks to refill that roster where you're likely going to find guys that Brandon Beane goes by his draft board.
And that's why the price, I think, is important. I think you hit on something that I talked about with Sterls, and it's something that's just absolutely wild to me. But the best way that I can rationale it is Brandon Beane, when they are picking for need, like it messes up every time. If you look at their first round picks or first pick in a draft where they're reaching for something they feel like they have position, they feel like they have to draft, they've blown it a ton of times. Kaiir Elam, I don't want to say Keon Coleman's a bust, but I mean, he's certainly not been a great player in his first year. It doesn't mean he can't evolve into one, but hasn't been great. Greg Rousseau, I think, has been good, but all these times that they've gone and tried to pick for need, they've been awful. And then all of a sudden they get into rounds 2 through 7 and they just draft the best player on their board and they absolutely crush it.
They kill it.
Absolutely crush it. So that to me is an argument in your favor of, well, if you go get Myles Garrett with that first round pick and whatever else you have to pay for it, you know what you're getting from that, and then give them the rest of the draft to try to make sure you still end up with a couple starters. I'm for that idea. I just want to know how much it costs.
Yeah, I think it's one of those. You are banking on something like again, like I said, you're banking on something that's a known commodity, and I think that's something for Brandon Beane that has value, right? Like that in the big moments that he's going to show up. And the other side about it, like if we're being like, oh, listen, I'm not always about this type of stuff, but like, what better way to sell a shit ton of tickets than bringing in a guy who is immediately going to become one of the faces of the organization? And again, if you're going back to their words, and they said the same thing when they went and traded for Stephon Diggs, like literally right before it, they said a very similar type of set of words. If you're going to talk about a guy that is going to be a difference maker, there's no bigger. And he even mentioned, he goes, guys like Chris Jones, $30 million defensive players, they don't just come around. And he even said very clearly, would I love to get one? Heck yes. Like Brandon Beane very clearly put his cards on the table and said, like a little giddy schoolgirl, like if he could find a guy like Myles Garrett, he'll do everything. And Brandon Beane is not adverse to the idea of swinging for trades. Like he will go for it if it's necessary, and he believes it's going to impact the team. I have a hard time believing he's going to shy away from it.
TD. 4 of your top 8 cap hits next year
are defensive linemen.
That is crazy.
It is.
That's a crazy number. And guess what? It's not even your best defensive lineman because Groot's not in there. So that's a weird place to be in. If you go get Myles Garrett, you'll have 5 in the top 8 or 9. And there's no doubt he's willing to put assets into it. But I mean, let's not get it twisted. They're not going to have trouble selling tickets.
Jaden Daniels has won Rookie of the Year.
No surprise there.
Yep.
Kid deserves it. Not happy about my bet that I placed that didn't come through. Bo Nix Rookie of the Year that I placed in August, but kid deserves it. But hey, listen, I'm all for big swings. But the last thing that I'll say about it, because it sounds like TD, you and I have a similar mindset where like, no risk it, no biscuit kind of thing. But that being said, you're not a bad team.
No.
Like this conversation, if you're a bad team, I think is different because I do think you need to take some swings and try to make some big moves. Everybody wants to come play for the Bills, right? Like, and did you see the interview with Max Crosby at the Super Bowl? I think it was with Kay Adams. And he's like, I don't want to go win a Super Bowl with the Chiefs. That would mean nothing. I want to go somewhere and be part of winning that matters. And, that's what you've got. You've got this underdog feel to the Bills with a MVP caliber quarterback who they feel like they're this close and they're the hero of the story right now. So I think it's really easy to get people to want to join that team. I just because it's so easy to get people to want to join that team, I'm wary of what it costs to get them to join that team,
Certainly. And I think it's going to be an exciting time. We've got, a little over 4 weeks till the NFL season kicks back off March 12th, 4 p.m. The league year begins. That's when all this stuff is going to really come to a head. You might already have deals in place. I mean, the NFL league stuff. We'll probably find out if there's a trade for whether it's Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, Trey Hendrickson, whomever. The Bills deem is the fit for this team. But you can rest assured that the Bills are going to do something. I am fairly confident that a trade is in the works, that Brandon Beane is going to be on the phones making something happen because this team is that close to being able to topple the Chiefs, and you can't keep wasting Josh Allen's youth. You can't. He's just that good.
Every time he's talked like that, every time the fans have talked like that, you need to make a move, whether it was Diggs or Miller. Every time the front office has sounded like, hey, we need to take a big swing here, they've done it. So to your point, I think you can expect something from the Bills this offseason.
And you very well knew that year with Stephon Diggs that they were going to go after a wide receiver, and it just kind of aligned. It worked. It made sense that they went after Stephon Diggs. So whether it's Max Crosby or Miles Garrett, or like we said, Trey Hendrickson, I think any one of them would be super, super, super helpful in the end goal of trying to topple the Chiefs. But that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate it. You guys joining us tonight. If you love the show, make sure to rate, review, like, subscribe, whatever. All those things means the world to us over here. Rob, I appreciate you joining in the absence of Sterling. Means the world. And make sure you guys subscribe to Rob at Rob T Radio on X. I want to keep calling it Twitter. It's so weird. On X. You'll be seeing more of us. We got a ton of stuff to kind of chop up. A lot of stuff coming down the pipeline. Very excited for everything here at Buffalo Media Network. So again, for Rob, for myself, for my brother Ian, who again does an incredible job backstage, making sure everything runs very smoothly. Thank you from all of us, Charge Nation. We will see you here next week. Hopefully an MVP to talk about for Josh Allen. We love you. Let's go Buffalo.
Go Bills.
Hot on the mic, bringing it straight from Western New York to the world. This is Charge with Thomas and Sterling. Bills Mafia, stand tall and proud. We got this.